Imagine this: you are sitting alone in a dimly lit room, the weight of your thoughts pressing down on your chest like an iron hand. Outside, life goes on, people laughing, walking, talking, but inside, something deeper stirs. A question you cannot answer, a wound you cannot see. You have everything that should make a life complete: knowledge, success, perhaps even love, yet there's an emptiness gnawing at the edges of your soul, a sense that none of it means anything. Now imagine that across from you sits a man whose mind has touched the farthest corners of human despair, a man who has peered into the abyss of existence and dared to ask the questions most people run from. Name? Friedrich Nietzsche. But what if I told you that even Nietzsche, the philosopher of will and power, once sat in that same chair of inner agony, desperate, broken, and weeping? What if the very man who told us to become who we are was himself terrified of who he might be? Imagine you are the physician called to treat Nietzsche, not his body, but his tormented mind. How would you heal a man who sees life itself as a sickness? How do you help someone who believes hope is a lie and that truth, if fully known, would drive anyone mad? And more importantly, if Nietzsche, one of the greatest minds to walk this earth, was secretly consumed by doubt and loneliness, what does that say about us? About you? You see, beneath the sharp brilliance of Nietzsche's words, there was a man drowning, caught between the unbearable pain of existence and the terrifying freedom of facing life without illusions. His story forces us to confront a haunting paradox. Is it possible that the very people who seem to hold all the answers are the ones closest to collapse? And if so, how many of us are standing at that same edge, wearing masks of strength while hiding a silent scream? But what if this struggle, the battle between despair and understanding, was not a flaw, but the key to a deeper truth about being human? Let's step into that room, where Nietzsche wept, and see what lies beneath the genius. What's your take on this? Comment below, and subscribe to Into Eatra to keep questioning with us. You sit there, watching Nietzsche as he stares at the floor, silent but burning. And in that silence, a question lingers in the air, heavier than any spoken word. Why does a man who sees so clearly, who understands the depths of human nature, feel so utterly lost? To understand this, you must look beyond his words, beyond the sharp lines of "Thus spoke Zarathustra" and the birth of tragedy, and see what lies underneath: a war between intellect and existence, between the mind that questions everything and a world that offers no satisfying answers. This is not just Nietzsche's war, it's the war of modern humanity. A war born the moment we began tearing down old gods and finding nothing solid to replace them. Carl Jung would later call this the crisis of meaning, the loss of the guiding myths that once gave life purpose. Without these myths, we float in a sea of doubt, clinging to ideas that no longer hold weight. Nietzsche was one of the first to fully face this crisis, to stare straight into the void left behind when God is dead. But what happens when a mind that sharp turns inward, demanding truth in a world that offers none? Arthur Schopenhauer, Nietzsche's early philosophical mentor, spoke of life as a cycle of endless striving, a wheel of suffering powered by human desire. According to Schopenhauer, we are driven by a will that never rests, a hunger that can never be satisfied. Nietzsche absorbed this pessimism but refused to accept it passively. Instead, he fought back, but what if the fight itself became its own prison? Because here is the hidden problem: when you strip away every comforting lie, what remains to hold you together? If there is no inherent meaning, no divine purpose, and if even morality is a construct, what anchors the soul? Nietzsche wasn't just battling ideas, he was battling himself. The relentless demand for truth had turned on its master, leaving Nietzsche in a storm of doubt that no philosophy could soothe. And yet, don't you see this struggle reflected in our own time? We are surrounded by endless information, yet starved for meaning. We've become masters at deconstructing illusions, but what do we build in their place? You can feel it, a deep unease that lingers in modern life, where everything is questioned, but nothing is sacred. Nietzsche's breakdown wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was, and remains, a mirror. A reflection of what happens when the mind seeks absolute freedom, but forgets that even freedom has its price. But what is that price? And how does it haunt us still? Let's step deeper into the shadows of this unseen struggle. You might think this struggle belongs only to great philosophers, to minds like Nietzsche that fly too close to the sun. But look closer, don't you see fragments of this same torment in everyday life? In the quiet desperation of a man stuck in a job that drains his soul. In the woman lying awake at night, staring into the dark, wondering if there's more to life than this endless cycle of work and distraction. The abyss that Nietzsche faced is not just philosophical, it is deeply human. And here's the most terrifying part: most people live in that abyss without even realizing it. They walk through life numb, endlessly scrolling, endlessly consuming, all to avoid the question that Nietzsche dared to ask: what is the meaning of all this? Modern society has become a machine that keeps us distracted from that question. Algorithms feed us endless noise. Social media sells us curated images of happiness that we know are false. And yet, we chase them, because without them, what's left? Silence. The same silence Nietzsche stared into before he wept. Psychologists call this existential avoidance, the way we bury deep fears of meaninglessness beneath layers of busyness and shallow pleasure. Jean-Paul Sartre described it as bad faith, the lies we tell ourselves to avoid facing freedom and its terrifying implications. We tell ourselves we are happy, that we are living our best lives, while something inside us whispers otherwise. Neurologically, it's even deeper. The brain is wired to seek patterns and purpose. But when those patterns collapse, when you no longer believe in the myths you were raised on, your brain keeps searching, becoming trapped in endless loops of anxiety and despair. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the horrors of Auschwitz, later wrote that the greatest pain is not physical suffering, but an existential vacuum, the sense that life has no meaning. And so we fill that vacuum with addictions, with endless work, with hollow relationships. But none of it lasts. Because what Nietzsche knew, and what we fear to admit, is that without meaning, freedom itself becomes a curse. To be free from all illusions is to face life's rawness, without shelter. And few can bear that. Nietzsche's collapse, then, is not just a story of one man's mind breaking. It's a prophecy. A warning about what happens when we remove every comforting belief but forget to build something in its place. So the question now is there a way out? Can we live with truth without being crushed by it? Let's now step into the rebellion, the only way to break free. Imagine standing at the edge of that same abyss Nietzsche faced, looking into the vast emptiness where all illusions have died. Now imagine refusing to turn away. Refusing to escape into distraction or false hope. Instead, imagine choosing to build something there, on that barren ground. That is the rebellion Nietzsche longed for, but could barely grasp. How do you rebel against meaninglessness itself? By creating meaning, not because it is handed to you, but because you will it into existence. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Übermensch, the overman or beyond man who creates his own values in a godless world. Not a tyrant, as some have misread, but a creator, someone who dares to shape meaning from chaos. But let's be honest, how many of us are ready to become such creators? To stop waiting for life to give us purpose and instead forge one with our own hands. It is terrifying because it means taking full responsibility for your existence. No excuses. No one to blame. Yet, history shows us that those who dared to do this became the very people who shaped the world. Think of Søren Kierkegaard, wrestling with despair but emerging with a philosophy that embraced the leap of faith, not a blind faith in dogma, but a leap into life itself. Or Albert Camus, who stared into the absurd and still said, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. The man condemned to push a stone forever, happy because he chooses to embrace the struggle as his own. Even Carl Jung, though critical of Nietzsche's isolation, saw the necessity of individuation, the journey to become whole by embracing your darkness and creating unity within. Jung knew that meaning isn't found, it's made, through a confrontation with the shadow, the rejected parts of ourselves. So here is the rebellion, to live as if your life matters, because you decide it does. To write your own myth in a world without gods. To find beauty in the struggle, not despite it. Imagine turning your suffering into art, your despair into creation, like a phoenix rising from its own ashes. But be warned, this is no easy path. It is a path for those willing to face themselves without flinching. A path that demands courage, not comfort. Still, if Nietzsche's life teaches us anything, it is this: better to suffer for a truth you create than to live comfortably in a lie. So now, we arrive at the final and deepest realization, one that could transform everything you think you know about life, suffering, and meaning itself. Are you ready to face it? Imagine this: you are standing alone on a mountain at dusk. The sun is sinking, bleeding red into the clouds, and the world below is vast, empty, silent. There are no gods to call upon. No comforting answers. Just you, the wind, and the growing darkness. It is here, in this emptiness, that Nietzsche believed we would finally see the truth. Not the truth of facts or science, but the truth of our own existence, that life has no meaning except the one we give it. And here lies the most profound, terrifying, and liberating realization: there is no meaning waiting for you out there. But there is infinite meaning waiting to be created within you. For all his agony, for all his despair, Nietzsche was not inviting us to surrender to nothingness. No, he was calling us to rise above it. To say yes to life even when life offers us nothing in return. Even when life breaks us, even when everything we love is taken from us, to still say, I will create meaning here. I will make this suffering mine. I will make it beautiful. But how? It begins by recognizing the great lie we have inherited, the lie that meaning must be given to us. From childhood, we are taught to look outside ourselves for purpose: parents, teachers, religion, society, all handing us ready-made answers. Do this, be that, follow these rules, and life will matter. But what happens when those answers collapse? When you wake up one morning and realize they no longer hold? Most people run. They numb themselves, through work, through pleasure, through constant noise, because facing the void is too much. But those who dare to face it, those who choose to stay in that moment of terror, discover something shocking. They are free. Free to create meaning that is entirely their own. Free to choose what matters. Free to love what they love, because they love it, not because someone told them to. Nietzsche called this the eternal return, the idea that life might repeat itself endlessly. But here's the question he asked that should stop you cold. If you had to live your exact life over and over again, every pain, every joy, every failure, would you still say yes to it? Would you embrace it fully, or would you curse it? Because if you would curse it, then you are not yet free. You are still chained to resentment, to regret, to a life you do not own. The ultimate rebellion, the ultimate truth, is to say yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to the heartbreak. Yes to the loneliness. Yes to the moments that tore you apart. Because in saying yes, you take back the power. You refuse to be a victim of fate. You become, in Nietzsche's words, the poet of your life. And here is where Nietzsche's tears, his breakdown, reveal their secret meaning. It wasn't just a collapse. It was a breaking open. The moment when a man who had stared too long into the abyss realized the abyss was not his enemy, but his canvas. Think about that. All the darkness inside you, your fear, your sorrow, your rage, what if it is not there to destroy you, but to give you the raw material for creation? What if the meaning of life is not something you find, but something you build out of your own brokenness? Now imagine looking back on your life, all the moments you wanted to run from, all the pain you thought had no purpose, and instead of wishing them away, you say, I chose this. I embraced this. I made something of this. That is what Nietzsche wanted. Not a life without suffering, but a life that turned suffering into strength. A life that, in the face of death and despair, still dances. Because here is the final paradox: only when you accept that life has no meaning do you become free to give it infinite meaning. Only when you stop begging life for answers do you realize that you are the answer. You are the creator. You are the myth maker. You are the one who decides what your life will stand for. Nietzsche wept because he saw a world without gods and knew how terrifying that would be. But maybe, just maybe, he also wept because he glimpsed something beautiful, a world where we become the creators of our destiny. So now, I ask you, what will you create? If no one is coming to give you meaning, what will you choose to love? What will you choose to fight for, to build, to become? Will you say yes to your life, all of it? Will you embrace the eternal return and declare that, even if life repeats forever, it is worth living because you made it yours? Or will you keep waiting for someone else to hand you a reason to live? Because in the end, the abyss will always be there. But what Nietzsche showed us, what his pain, his genius, and his tears whisper to us across time, is that you can look into that abyss and smile. Smile, because you are free. Smile, because you no longer need permission to live. Smile, because even in a godless, chaotic universe, you are the creator of meaning, and that is enough. So now, as you step back from this mountain, as night falls and the stars begin to burn above you, ask yourself, what story will you write on the walls of your own abyss? Because that story, your story, is all that will ever matter. And maybe, just maybe, when you write it boldly enough, the abyss will weep, not in terror, but in awe. What's your take on this? Comment below, and subscribe to Into Eatra to keep questioning with us.